Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. I'm so excited. A book that I absolutely love, Evergreen by Rebecca Rasmussen. What a wonderful book about love for a daughter, for friends, for the wilderness. Well, Rebecca, welcome to Anderson's in Naperville. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. The store is beautiful.
Oh,
And we're
well,
surrounded by books, so there can't be anything better.
That's right. It's the smell and everything.
Yeah, right.
It's the touch, everything. Let's breathe it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I love this book. And I want to tell you, my 19-year-old, my youngest daughter, read it, and she loved it too.
Did she?
Yes,
really?
she did. Absolutely.
Oh, that's exciting to
Because
hear.
I had the ARC sitting around, and she's been reading a lot home from school this summer, so she picked that one up and absolutely loved it. So
That's fantastic, because I was a little worried maybe that certain parts of it would be
no,
tough
not
for
at
her,
all.
but
Well, she's a
okay.
voracious reader, and she's read so much, but she wanted me to tell you how much she enjoyed it
Oh,
too.
well, tell her thank you so much. I love that.
Yeah. So your baby, this second baby, your second book is out in the world, and it's only been about a week and a half, I think, officially.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So how does it feel? What are you hearing from your readers, from your fans, but also that experience of that second book out? I know the experience had to be a lot different than getting that first book published, but how was the process for you this time around?
You know, the second book was a little bit different because I switched publishers.
Okay.
I mean, all within Random House, but I was with Crown
right.
to begin with, and then this time I'm with Knopf. And it was a glorious experience this time around. My editor, Jennifer Jackson, is just fabulous, and I always have people who they feel that these books are probably difficult to sell in the world, but they're so excited to take on that challenge.
Sure.
So she, like my first editor, just fell in love and really wanted to kind of give her heart to that in a way that it didn't matter if it was commercially sort of a viable book or not. And that's where I do best. So it's been good, but everyone says that the second book is really tricky. And I
that's
think
interesting.
They say it's
Tricky
to publish it, to get it published, and it's also tricky to write it. So the tricky to write it part, for sure, was my experience. Because I think the first one, it was everything went into it possible, and people had to say, stop, don't put every single thing in this book, every detail. And this one, I think that I had a vision for the book, but the original draft only had 2 of the 4 voices that are now currently in the book.
Right.
And that was what my editor said. She said, I feel like these characters are so special, they need their own voices. So let's go give that to them. And so a year of working through that and trying to give that to them, they now all have a voice in here.
They were great voices, all of them.
Thank you so much.
But with Evergreen, you know, where did that little germ, that little seed start to germinate, you know, for the beginnings of the story?
You know, I wrote a story in graduate school about a guy named Tux, of course.
I love his name.
And he was a taxidermist in the story. When all of my friends on the East Coast, I was at University of Massachusetts, in the MFA program, and everyone was writing about very, like, sort of upscale literary events in Boston and New York, and they're like, what, the woods? Stuffing, you know, an animal and putting it on the wall? That's very strange. So it came from there. He was my center point, and then from around there, I sort of built the place a little bit more in my mind, and then I got to falling in love with them, and I couldn't let them go, so I said, I've got to have a whole book about this.
Well, and you always write about such strong women, and I want to know what, you know, do you say it Eveline, or how do you say her name, or Eve?
I say it Eveline, but
Eveline.
I'm happy.
I know, I always said Eveline, so I just want to make sure I was pronouncing it. But Eveline Sturm, you know, she's the character we start this book off, and that's how it sort of starts off with what's happening in her life, and it's 1938. And we're talking way north in Minnesota. But she's a town girl. You know, she's a town girl. But she marries a German immigrant, and he's their taxidermist, Emo.
Yeah.
And she sort of heads up in a boat through rivers to get up to this cabin that really isn't quite what she's used to. And I just, but it's so interesting to see the transformation of this young woman. You know, I think she's in love. She's just, newly married. So, and I think sort of her surroundings. But what the transformation that takes place in her, and getting used to living way up there in the middle of nowhere was just, to me, it was fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a fun adventure for me to actually write that part, because I had to go through each scene and think about what would that be like to arrive on the boat in the middle.
Right.
And to make your way. And that's always my fantasy, is that I'll be able to live in the woods one day and have my cabin. So I got to sort of play that out a little bit in the book, which was very, very nice, actually.
Is she based on anybody? And also, too, her daughter in this book. And we don't want to do too many spoilers because we want people to read the story for themselves. But are they based on any women that you know, or any part of you?
You know, I think that Eveline, she's not based on someone particular, but she's based on this sort of ideal situation that I think my grandmother talks about. Both grandmothers talked about getting married in that way, like with such bright eyes and such excitement, and they're marrying for love, and then about a year later, like, hard things happen to them, difficult circumstances. So they would probably have described themselves as like the rosy-cheeked 18-year-olds who are like, my life's going to start now. And they're like, and it got a lot tougher after
a lot
that.
tougher, right. But so it's told in parts, like you mentioned when you're writing this book, and getting it down to the 4 voices. And you said you didn't start off to write that, but in a way, did the story develop as the characters developed for you, and the voices in your head? So did that one follow the other in a particular order?
I tend to write in a linear way, so I'm not one of those writers that like, oh, there's a great scene for the ending and I'm going to write it now. So it absolutely sort of organically led to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And you know, each section, it's a little sad to let go of the characters that are in the previous section, but then it was also so exciting because in my mind, you know, maybe halfway through the section before, the new characters and the new generation sort of popped up in my mind, and then I was excited about them too, and couldn't wait to get to their sections.
So I was wondering, all the research, you had to have done quite a bit, even though I know you love the outdoors, you love, you know, I always like to say up north. To me, those are magical words.
Yeah, no, they are. They're still to me,
whether it's up north in Michigan or Minnesota or Wisconsin, just up north. Knowing that
you get across the state line in Illinois, and I think it's magical.
It totally is. But the research, you know, the taxidermy details that you've given this, the way Emil and, you know, the trapping they do, the fishing, even having Eveline when she's trying to learn to fish, all those little details you put in. And just knowing what it was like way up there, you know, in the middle of nowhere, where people were kind of homesteading, you know, in these cabins.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the late 30s, and then the book moves into the 50s, you know. But how much research did you do, and what was fun about the research you did on these topics?
You know, I did the research along the way. I felt initially I didn't really know where in time it was going to be, but early on in the book we know that, you know, our new husband has to go back to Germany. And it just came about that I'm like, uh-oh, we're pretty early. We're definitely in the late 30s when this would maybe be happening in the rest of the world, the beginnings of war. So at that point, once I knew, oh no, he has to go away, that I would have to do some research. But I'm not the kind of historical writer. I have some friends who are amazing historical writers who, I mean, they spend a full year every day reading book after book after book to get every single beautiful detail right. I think that's why I write about these sort of obscure places, because it also gives me the freedom from history, so I can invent my own, based around, so we don't have running water yet. We don't have, you know, some basic things that historically happening, or you probably wouldn't get news of this up north very quickly at all. It's not going to pass. You know, so things like that. I read a lot of journal accounts and like strange things like fur trappers, like accounts like French Canadian fur trappers coming down through northern Minnesota, stuff like that. And that was really fun because I thought, oh my gosh, there's probably more books here, because these are all very adventurous spirits who are partaking in this kind of life, you know.
Well, you know what, the women, we mentioned how strong they are in these books, you know, and they start off, you know, she's naive, but she's forced with things that happen to her. Like, again, I don't want to give too many spoilers that happens to her. But the woman she she meets across the river, Lulu.
Yeah.
What a character.
Oh,
and this
Lulu.
coat she wears. And the coat becomes very special to, of course, Eveline too, and then her daughter eventually. But, you know, this, that her character and the way they support one another. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so this bond they create was really special in the book too. I think they're very different from one another.
Very different.
Very
from one
different, but yet they become great friends and great support.
Yeah, Lulu is one of my very favorite characters in the book. In fact, the book at one point, because the coat does have significance, there was like, we were tossing around different titles in New York, and they were talking about, what about something about this coonskin coat? It has to get in there. And I was like, I don't know if people want to buy something that has the word coonskin coat on it, but I mean, we'll talk about that.
Right, yeah. No, but and I love the cover on this book. I mean, it looks sort of like block prints, you know, and the paper, the way it feels to the paper. It just has that feel of something from up north.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me, I went to summer camp in northern Wisconsin for many years. Really rustic camp, not like today's camps where everyone's doing like paragliding or something.
Sure.
This was definitely very low rent. It still is, which is what I love about the camp. But it reminds me of the old sort of posters we used to do for shows up there, and like they would have them posted from when the camp opened in the 50s, and it just reminds me of something old and a little worn, but with a lot of heart.
Yeah. And you know, in the book, and I read that you grew up with 4 brothers. I grew up with 3.
Oh, well, so we're the same. We can just hang out forever.
I know. But I mean, the guy character is Hux, you know, and his friend, Lulu's son. It's just, his name's just left me.
Gunther. Oh, it was, I know. I'm like, I wrote the book and I can't even remember.
And the friendship they create, and they're so rough and tumble in what they do with each other. I just wondered if a lot of that, and also too, how you have Eveline, how she becomes so strong after something happens to her in the book, and she has to, you know, basically she's fending for herself.
Yeah.
And what she does. But I wonder if a lot of that came from growing up with 4 brothers, and of course,
and growing up with 4 brothers, like Wisconsin brothers who are out, you know, because my parents live in Spring Green, which is a really tiny little rural town west of Madison in the middle of nowhere. So that all of that experience, I was just sort of expected to be able to trudge along with them if I wanted to go. So we had all sorts of adventures, and they're rough, and I was not left out of that roughness. So maybe Lulu, I'm like, there you go. My real spirit is a Northwoods girl. I'm in a skirt, but don't let that fool you. Yeah.
And you know, is it Nama? Is that how you pronounce it? Oh, good. I got it right. Okay, that's what I thought. And I don't want to do another spoiler of the story because there's, you know, we don't carefully like her daughter. What a character, and you understand what she's gone through and everything, but yet she does so many things that are so frustrating, you know, in the relationships she tries to create. But I don't want to give away too much, and that's why she couldn't do certain things. Yeah, and it's so interesting. Her mother and herself, what they do to give up something so precious in their lives, but they know it's the best thing to do at the time.
It's actually sort of an act of goodness for a moment, you know. In
for a moment, but it's really about love. But without spoilers, but we will give away a little bit. Nama is an orphanage. She's raised in a Catholic orphanage. And Sister Cordelia, the one character, wow, what a piece of work. I mean, what a piece of work. It's sort of the horrors or the stereotypical thing you hear about what happens in certain orphanages. And I just wondered, did you base it on anything, or you know, basically maybe hearing stories about stuff, but you know, those cases you hear, and not only in the United States, but in other countries.
And you know what, that I actually did do a lot of research on, and at first it was an even darker section because I had read so many terrible stories of people, and even not people where it had been collected into a book or in a newspaper article, just people's accounts even on the internet sharing, and sort of, you know, places where they felt comfortable to share that part of their life, and just seeing how it wasn't just this place or this one it was really widespread, and often in the belief that, like, in the belief of God, like this is God's sort of way, and I think that's probably really confusing to the character Nama too, because it was all in the name of God, and I think Sister Cordelia really believes that. It doesn't make it any better, but she believes that. So I think. Yeah, she is a piece of work. But even by the end of that section, I can't help but feel just a twinge of compassion for her, and thinking, what happened to you that made you like this? You know, the way that these things travel through generations is so interesting.
Right, right. So your first book, The Bird Sisters, was in Wisconsin. This one is now northern Minnesota. Yeah. I'm going to call you, you're a heartland kind of author. You know, really, where we are from here in Illinois, and the way a lot of us here, we love Wisconsin. We go to Michigan. We go to these places. What is it about the heartland or Midwestern, that we are in the Midwest? Is there a certain sensibility, a certain something that you put into your novels or you feel from, because this is where you're from. Yeah. And where you spent a lot of your, those years.
A lot of time.
Yeah, right. Do you think there is something to say about that? I mean, about Midwestern sensibilities or something that adds something to your characters?
Yeah, and you know what? And I think that a lot of people that love the book are like, I just love the characters so much. They have so much heart. And I feel that whenever I come back to the Midwest, I know it's a bit of a cliche that, in the Midwest, everyone says hi on the streets in their little towns. But they really do. And there's such family, and the history of your family is so important in a way that even my husband's from Colorado, and the whole mentality out west is that you build your future. Right, you don't have to look back. And so it's totally different between our families. For me, I'm always looking at old journals and what my grandmother's pictures were. It's just, I like being called back to that. It feels so much like home when I'm far away from it, and I can't help but miss the meadows and the fields and the trees and the river. And I'm excited. I get to go do that in a couple of days.
Oh,
so
well, good. Well, good way that you come back home. Yeah. But it's sort of like that. I think in this book, and you talk about that love of what your grandmother, brought to your life, and what she still means to you in your life. But there's so much of the love in this book, and different kinds of love, and it is the love of the outdoors, of the wild, and I love that. It's such a homage. I think, and for Nama, for her, it's also. That's in her blood, and being outside is so much easier for her than being inside.
So much easier for her. I think she feels almost like a trapped animal in some ways being inside. She feels caged and can't figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah. But also too, I think all the other types of love, it's the love between Gunther and Hux, and it's the love between a mother and a daughter. Yeah. And it's also a love between friends. It was lots of different loves. And and I think and how they're supporting even through all the tragedy and the things that happen, how much we depend on these things to get us through.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe in love. I know it's a little bit sentimental, and it's not very cool to say these days, but I really, really do. And so whenever I start a book, I have that feeling of like, that's going to be a constant motif in all of my books, the way people love each other and the way that they survive things that have happened to them because they love each other.
Right. And even in this book with a lot of the regret, because, the two, the mother and daughter, the main characters of this book, have so much regret, but also too there's so much respect, and it's even the respect for nature that you put into this. A lot of it, even what Emo and his son do, when they kill an animal, there's that respect shown for it.
I feel like that's sort of the old values and the old sort of way of hunting and taking an animal, and that appeals to me because I have, my father used to hunt when I was little, and he's since stopped doing that because he says, and I mean, he's a big born and bred kind of Wisconsin guy, camouflage, that kind of thing. But he says that he's come to sort of respect the animals in a way that if I don't need that meat, I don't need that for it's such a beautiful animal. He said the last time he was in the forest, he didn't shoot because it was such a beautiful, it was just a lovely animal, and I think there's something to that sort of old value of respect.
That's interesting.
Which is neat.
And again, without spoilers, for women though, in the late 30s, way up north in Minnesota, when you're talking about, and also going into the 50s, it was still dangerous for a woman alone up there. So did you look into some of that? Because I mean, it was, you took your chances with certain things.
It's really dangerous. I mean, and we're not just talking about like the wilderness aspects either. Yeah, so there are the conditions of, how can one person alone, a woman, spend the winter and cut enough wood and get, the actual sort of things to get through the different seasons and that. But there's also, if one bad person crosses your path, you're defenseless against that, really. And you probably still would be if you were a woman alone there. And I think that's the other thing. We do glorify the woods and getting away now, but there is a sense of danger in the book from time to time as well.
And you know, in the book there was one scene where, you know, Eveline takes the buck. She gets the buck, but then she's going to preserve it. She's going to taxidermy this incredible animal. And I just found that so fascinating, that whole thing of how she does the whole process from getting the buck to, you know, this is ordered to make some money. She needs the money.
Needs it,
She needs the money, but the whole thing about, she read the manuals that her husband had.
Oh my goodness.
And I can't imagine reading that for fun. You know? But if that's all you have to read or to do. But did you study a lot of that? Because I thought that was just fascinating.
Yeah, there was an old taxidermy manual, like up on, I forget what it was. It's like a free sort of preserved historical document site. And I got to it and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. But I was reading through it and I thought, but really, if you were alone and there was no one else to talk to, nothing else to do, and the first year of your marriage, you're this young girl and your husband is away all day long chopping wood to get ready for the winter. I mean, really doing things to survive. It might be something that the words, maybe she's not like, wow, I want to be a taxidermist. But there might be some sense of conversation there in a way that, like, you just want words from people, anything. So she does, and she's incredibly inventive in the end. You know, she learns a lot, and she does. Who could learn to just preserve a buck like that and actually do that pretty well.
Yeah, no kidding. And you just see that, again, the transformation, even from the time she set foot up there, but also as she goes through so much in this process, she comes out a completely different woman on the other side.
She really does. I definitely, she's a person I admire. I have no idea if I would make the same choices in real life, but luckily I haven't been thrown into that position.
Yeah. And Hux, I loved the story told from his perspective, you know, and what a wonderful guy. He would be like the brother anybody would want, you know, but he really is, you know, but to him, family is so important. Yeah. And finding the sister he didn't know he had, and this sort of thing. But it also realized that no matter how you try and build family, all families have their baggage and have their thorns.
Yeah, and you can't, no matter how much you work to save someone or rescue them, ultimately that person has to be ready to rescue themselves a little bit first in order to grasp on. Like, he keeps reaching for her, and she doesn't know how to hold on to him yet. She wants to, but she doesn't know how to do it.
Yeah. So you said before we started that you do some teaching out at UCLA and talking about creative writing and stuff. So what is the number one piece of advice, or a couple of pieces of advice that you give your students? You know, now that you are the seasoned published
writer.
No. Yeah.
It's a little bit different than it was when I was younger, before I knew a little bit about the business and how it sort of works logistically to be a professional writer. But now I give this advice. It's like maybe a little sentimental, but it is very simple. And it's, even if you're getting rejections, even if your other, creative writing sort of cohorts are saying, this needs work, this isn't very good, to keep going no matter what. Because I've seen people give up and they've been really miserable because of it and had wished that they hadn't. And now I've met a lot of people in their 50s and 60s retiring, going back to the thing that they wanted to do. And so they would say, don't give up. Keep plugging away at it, because good things do happen with time. They really do if you keep working.
Okay, great advice. And I know you started with short stories. You wrote a lot of short stories before you published your first novel. And was that transition difficult to go from, sort of that genre and that sort of that writing and sort of running to full-fledged,
yes. It was very difficult. And I remember thinking with the Bird Sisters, when I was writing that, like, what is a chapter? How do you write a chapter? I have no idea. And so how long should this be? But that's part of the fun of it the first time, is really like muddling through and thinking about all the ways in which you're doing something wrong in order to create something sort of pure and true and right. Now it's more exciting because I can do more with the narrative than I could the first time around. So it's neat to kind of be learning how to do something better as I go to it.
Sure.
You hope to improve with each book in some, strong ways, even if people are like, well, I like the characters better in this one,
Yeah,
the improvement is what we hope for.
Exactly. So tell us what you're working on now.
I am working on a book. This one is going to be back in Wisconsin, so Wisconsin people will be excited. And this one is actually new for me because it's set in very contemporary times right now. So strange things are appearing in the story that I'm like, is that a phone? That's really weird. Why is that there? That's a working vehicle? Like it's not, some sort of like broken down truck out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So this one is going to be 3 storylines kind of interwoven. They're not family, but they kind of become like family through an event early on in the novel that brings them together. So they're people that are kind of needing that sense of connection, but are sort of living these disparate lives right now.
And it's rural Wisconsin?
I'm thinking, what I have in my mind is kind of like Spring Green.
In
my mind, but contemporary, because I think I've just been missing it so much. So I have the river in my heart right now. I'm feeling sort of the smell of the river, the water rushing by. And so I'm excited, and there's a great little girl in that one, so I'm very excited.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I have a daughter that's 7.5, so she's been immensely helpful in getting good, clear dialogue.
Okay, good. You have to give her an acknowledgement.
Yeah, I know. But then this one's for her too,
dedicated
so she's
to
going to
her,
have all
right?
of them. My husband's going to get jealous.
Okay. Well, you have to write him in one of these days.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, Rebecca, at the end of these interviews, I do a little quiz. You know all the answers. Most of them are all book related. So this is sort of, you know the answers. This is lightning round. So whatever comes to you first. Okay. What was your favorite book when you were young?
Well, when I was really young, I really loved the sort of picture books, the Goodnight Moons of the world, that kind of thing. When I was older, I loved the Boxcar Children. Favorite series ever. My mom used to read it to us every night.
Who wouldn't want to live in a boxcar without your parents?
But you see how it's similar?
No. I do.
Like,
I get that.
I really think I should say something about the Boxcar Children in here. I went from Goodnight Moon to the Boxcar Children. I don't know what that means.
No, that makes sense. Okay, how about something that still has remained with you from college or even when you're working on your master's degrees?
A book?
Yeah.
Louise Erdrich. She has so many books, but I read Love Medicine when I was in a class in college, and I absolutely fell in love with this sort of larger-than-life, tall-tale kind of esque way of storytelling. That, again, I can see the influence, absolutely. Like, I don't want to say too much because people will be like, oh dear, we better break out her book next.
Yeah, and she's fantastic. How about a book you've been an evangelist for that you could not tell enough people that they had to read it?
I'm actually kind of doing that right now for a current book that's out. This wonderful woman, Rebecca Roter, who wrote Last Night at the Blue Angel.
I love that book. She was just here.
And I know, I saw that. I was so excited. We were missing each other. We thought it would be the 2 Rebeccas would be a great idea, but our schedules didn't work. But she is fantastic and fabulous and smart, and her book, even though we have totally different settings, we have this sense of mother-daughter connections in our stories that we both really connected to.
So true. And that takes place in Chicago. So
and it's so different, though. It's really a great novel. So I'm telling everyone, Last Night at the Blue Angel, pick it up.
Okay. Good choice. Fantastic. Okay, have you ever faked reading a book?
But I have to be honest, probably in some literary crowd. When I was in graduate school, I was like, oh, yes, I've read that.
Yeah, right. I think we've all done that, whether we admit to it or not.
I don't remember what book, because it could have been many. I try not to do that anymore, but who knows? Tonight could be my night.
Okay, and how about something you share with your daughter? You said she's 7 years old, right? Anything you love just to curl up and read, or something you did when she was even younger?
When she was a little girl, there was this little book called, and I don't even remember the author, but we have it. It's our beloved book called Each Peach Pear Plum.
Oh, Allberg.
And it has all of the little sort of tales. So it's like, each peach pear plum, I spy Tom Thumb. Tom Thumb in the cupboard, I spy Mother Hubbard. Mother Hubbard in the cellar, I spy Cinderella. I can't believe I remember some of that.
I read that to my 2 oldest kids. We read it constantly. Well, congratulations, 100%. You did well on that quiz. But Rebecca, I want to thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me, and congratulations on Evergreen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to live in this book aisle forever because it's a good one. Take it.
Fantastic conversation with author Rebecca Rasmussen about her new book, Evergreen. You've got to read this one. It's about love, it's about strong women, and it's all in northern Minnesota. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.